All right, good evening, everyone. This is the meeting of the Solar and Battery Storage Moratoria Study Committee, and it's November 22nd, 2022. This is aired by Area 58 on cable channel 15. Before we start, just for the record, I just want to say who's here tonight. Starting to my left, we have Connie Shea. They have Paul Boucher, the building commissioner, is with us tonight. Sarah Hewins is with us tonight. Next is Roger Shores, and then Jen Bogart, John Gatsky, and Savory Moore, and myself, Bruce Mackey. All right, I just want to we can't really discuss this tonight, but I think everybody was sent an email stating that the moratorium for the solar and battery storage was disapproved by the Attorney General. And that was a letter dated on November 14th, 2022. So I don't think we can really talk about that tonight. If there are any questions that anybody has, or if anybody wants to talk about it at our next meeting, I can put it on the agenda. I just want to say that Tom Bott isn't with us tonight. There was a death in the family, so he is going to be out till after Thanksgiving. So to begin with, Tom and I, before we left, he made some copies. We went over some material for this meeting, and he's hoping that at the next meeting we might have someone to talk about the battery storage and solar projects, and but we're still waiting till he can get somebody to speak about that. So tonight we're going to, the first thing is a review of the current bylaw. I don't know if anybody had a chance to take a look at these things. If not, you can ask me questions, or I can go over it piece by piece. But, Mr. Fennessy, the town administrator, just stepped in to be with us tonight too. So the existing solar bylaw was one part of the package that you have tonight, and Tom pointed out the changes from 2019 and 2022. I don't know if I can go over these changes one by one, if anybody has any questions. They are in our existing bylaw. The only reason, I think one of the reasons Tom did this was because since I've been here for years with the planning board, I'm probably know the most from the planning board about what happened with a lot of the solar stuff. I can kind of go over it, I guess, as everybody's looking at it. Part of it was the use regulation schedule, and I guess, I wasn't quite sure about this. It has SP with an asterisk, and I think that was done, it was just the asterisk that was put in, and it was, that signified a use authorized under special permit from the planning board as provided under section 5300, which was special permits.
Bruce, do you mind me asking which one you're looking at?
Okay, so the first part of what I'm looking at now is the Town of Carver zoning bylaw. And it was Part A, it was 2230, and it has a use regulation schedule, and that was, the use regulation schedule was altered. Just wanted to point that out. See, it has page 1. This is on page 2, and then on page 3.
So, quick question there,
Yep.
Bruce. Under GBP, it has the plus, it says denotes large-scale ground-mounted solar voltaic limited to 15% maximum area within the underlying zoning district. Now, is that 15% of the lot that it would be on, or 15% of the town, or?
I think it means 15% of the underlying district, which would be residential, so whatever's allowed in residential.
Well, under GBP, it's a green business park,
Mhm.
Yeah.
so.
Yep.
So 15% of the entire, green business park?
I don't know.
That would be the lot that you're proposing the solar to be installed
So 50% of the lot?
on, of the lot.
Okay.
So a maximum area of 15% of the lot, okay.
Can we make a note to, better define that then?
Yeah, you want to make sure that you're talking to the microphone, because what's going to happen is we'll be here talking tonight, and then Tom's going to review the video, and if you have any questions, we can talk about tonight. Tom will listen to the video, and then we can get some answers of what you need. So I'll just continue. Anything else on that? Okay, so the next was on page 3, which was large-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installations. And see, this was a change in 2022, and that was for the roof-mounted solar installations. I think we know about that.
Within the Green Business District.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you go to page 5, another thing that was amended in 2019 was to allow reduced setbacks for large-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installations to a minimum of 50 feet in the RA district. And then 1B was to amend section 3580.25.1 to allow setbacks to reduce to a minimum of 12.5 feet by right where abutting arrays are proposed in mutual partnership or ownership or common ownership that transcend existing lot lines. And that was when we had solar projects come before us. I think it was on Cranberry Bogs and in different parcels. And so instead of doing 50 feet from the property line and 50 feet from the property line, we reduced it to 12.5 feet if it was owned by the same company. And then 3580.25.2 was to amend section 3580.25.2 to provide that when one project is proposed on multiple contiguous parcels, only one single application is required. So that was so we wouldn't have to have multiple hearings on solar arrays that were on contiguous parcels of land next to each other. And then in 2019, he added the dual-use large-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installation chart. And that was because when this whole solar started, it started with ground-mounted, and then dual-use came in several years afterwards. So we set up a chart for the dual use setbacks and abutter notifications. So any questions about any of those? That was just kind of, just to go over what's been done over the years.
On page 8, the chart should be changed to reflect that it's 50 foot now, instead of 25 feet. The first asterisk at the bottom of the page.
Well, it isn't. That's because it isn't. I know that as we go through this, we were going to change that, but then that was, that went to town meeting, and we were gonna do both at 50, but it never got changed because at town meeting, it was, it went back to the planning board.
That was 2019 or 2020?
It's further on in what I have here.
Okay.
We'll get to that.
Because I see on page 5, section 1A, a minimum of 50 feet standard setbacks in an RA district, which seems to directly,
Is that for ground mounted or is that for,
Large-scale ground-mounted,
the ground mounted was 50 feet. And that was one of the things
large-scale
that
ground mounted.
our
Okay.
former planner wanted to make the same because it was confusing. The ground mounted was 50 foot, it could be reduced to 50 feet, whereas the dual use was 25 feet.
Well, they're still both mounted on the ground, right? I mean, whether it's dual use or not.
Well, they're both mounted on the ground, but ground mounted is lower than dual use. Dual use is up higher so that you can farm under the panels.
So wouldn't it be appropriate, because they're taller, to maintain the 50-foot setback?
Well, that's what the planning board suggested when we were gonna do these changes for town meeting, but it never got approved at town meeting.
I
But
think,
that's something that we could, yeah, that's something that we could change. I mean, as I go into this, as we go into it, it's not on this one, but on 1C, there were bylaw amendments that were tabled at 2021 town meeting, and I'll go over those, okay? Some of them were good ideas, some of them were kind of confusing, and there was a lot of them, but we'll get into that. So any other questions about that? Yes, what?
Are you done on that? Okay.
Yeah,
So, I met with Mr. Ward today, and he wasn't available to come to the meeting tonight, but he did suggest on page 7, under control of vegetation, the last line that says the Agricultural Commission and Board of Health are to approve all proposed herbicides. And he would suggest that read that it should follow the regulations of the Environmental Protection Agency and the Mass Department of Agriculture Pesticides Bureau, rather than the Board of Health.
It's true, because Pesticides Bureau is what everyone has to follow.
Okay,
where is this again?
So page 7 on the top,
Oh, on the top,
3580.33,
okay.
control of vegetation. So where the last line says the Agricultural Commission and the Board of Health that approve all proposed herbicides, he would suggest that it read that they should follow the regulations of the Environmental Protection Agency and the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture Pesticides Bureau.
So that would eliminate both the Agricultural Commission and the Board of Health?
Well, he's more concerned about the Board of Health and eliminating that part of it, based on, I guess, their...
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it was clear. So Agricultural Commission stays in?
Yeah, he didn't mention that, so
Okay.
I'm assuming that's what he was looking at.
Okay.
You
Right.
didn't finish your sentence. You said he's more concerned with the Board of Health based on.
Having the Board of Health taken out of this.
Why?
And based on the Environmental Protection Agency, because those are the regulations that they have to follow.
They have to follow Pesticide Bureau's regulations.
I
It's
understand.
a higher level
Yeah.
of concern, so.
Yeah, but the Board of Health couldn't, like, you couldn't take those regulations to the Board of Health and say, here are the pesticides I'm going to use,
No, you have
and
to,
No.
you
here
have
are
to do,
how I.
you have to do what the Department of Agriculture,
I know,
Pesticide
but
Bureau
you
You
could-
says.
should talk in the mic.
You could take the regulations from the whoever at the state and the herbicide that you're going to use, bring them to the Board of Health, show the Board of Health, this is the regulation, this is what I'm going to use, just for confirmation, to show the town this is what I'm doing,
I mean,
just as an added layer of protection. I don't see harm in that.
yeah, I mean, you could do that. It's redundant because they have to follow the regulations
Yeah.
of the EPA. So regardless of what it is, as long as it follows the regulations, then it's approved.
Yeah, the Board
Because
of
it's a
Health,
higher level than the local board
Yeah,
of
than the
health.
local board.
the Board of Health really couldn't take any action if it followed the EPA and the MDOA. So.
Right, but they're there as a way to make sure that that's what they're doing.
It's like checks and balances.
Okay.
I don't think anything's less, I think there's nothing more balanced than the Pesticide Bureau. Because they've been working for years doing this. This is what they do.
But they're not,
I know,
but
but
are
this
they,
local-
is the Pesticide Bureau local to Carver?
It's a state bureau.
Is it local to Carver?
It's a state bureau.
Okay, that's statewide, so it's over
Yeah.
in Springfield, right?
I don't know where it's
They're not paying
located.
attention down here, are they?
John,
Board
I'm
of
just
Health-
telling you, this
but
is
the-
what all the growers have to comply with the Pesticide Bureau.
Exactly, and the Board of Health is a local authority to keep an eye on things.
Well, you know what?
I don't think
I
they're
can talk to the
familiar
Board
with
of Health and see how
pesticides.
they feel
Yeah.
about that. And see if they feel offended about changing that.
Yeah, and
that
and I
right?
think maybe the intent is not to have it just the Agricultural Commission and the Board of Health as it stands
Mhm.
now. Because the Board of Health cannot agree to approve something that may be a violation of the EPA
Right.
or the Mass Department of Agriculture.
That's right.
So I think that was his intent, to change this. You know, and maybe it's, and shall be submitted to the Board of Health or something like that. Language like that may work too,
Okay.
so that the Board of Health is knowledgeable of what it is they're actually putting in,
Okay.
if that covers what you were saying.
Okay, I can talk to Tom and to the Board of
Yeah.
Health and see what they have to say. But we can certainly add the language about the Environmental Protection Agency and the Pesticide Bureau
Mhm.
also.
I don't know what licensing the Board of Health would have to have for this also. It's strictly regulated.
That's true.
Yeah, and again, I get that you're saying that they should be knowledgeable of what it is that they're using, correct? The
Yeah,
Board of
just
Health.
To
Well,
show
it's-
them-
Yeah,
But it's,
but they can't approve
but
something
it's
that,
pretty easy, though, for a grower to come in or for these solar people to come in and say, this is the pesticide we're going to use, and the Board of Health to look at it and say, well, this particular one isn't on my list. You can't use that. You don't need to be licensed to cross-reference.
Well, Roger, you
I
explain.
don't follow you, but.
I don't either.
What do you mean you don't follow? Somebody
Okay,
comes in and
I
says,
said I don't
somebody
follow
comes
what
in.
you're saying.
But somebody comes in and says, this is the pesticide I want to use underneath this solar field. And for the control of the vegetation.
Hmm?
And the Board of Health, I'm bringing it to the Board of Health, and the Board of Health looks at it and says, you want to use pesticide X. Pesticide X is not on my list, but pesticide Y is. You can use pesticide Y, but you cannot use pesticide X.
So pesticide Y may be a violation of the Mass
Yeah.
Department of Agriculture or the Environmental Protection Agency, which is a higher level, so they cannot use it even though it's not on the Board of Health's lists.
You're looking at the Board of Health to to make sure that the person follows state law.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that's what these people do.
It's a local authority to make sure that the people who are operating these things are doing the right thing.
Mhm.
It's not, if it's regulated by the state, then this wouldn't be something with us making up our own rules saying you can't use that. It's just checking to make sure that they're following the rules, and if it's already in there, I don't see a reason to change it.
If what's already in there.
The language is already in the bylaw, so I
No,
don't.
the language is the Agricultural Commission and Board of Health.
Right, so I don't see a reason to remove them if that's already in there.
No, and again, you
So-
may not have to remove them. You may have them as an additional to the Environmental Protection Agency
Yeah, so
and the
just,
Mass Department of Agriculture.
like John is saying and I'm saying, just
Mhm.
bring in and show us, this is what the people say we can use. We're using it, so we in town know, okay, that's what's going in.
Yep.
Every grower has to file to the handler and to the state
Right.
a list of everything they used.
This may not be a grower, though. This may be a solar company. This is only pertains to the area underneath the solar array.
I understand.
Okay.
I understand.
So it may not be a grower. It may be someone from a
Right.
company that's out of town who doesn't get it.
Well, I think, if I may, I think the point was that when you do these large-scale things of any kind, big bogs, big solar, you have to have what's it called, the applicator, the guy who applies the pesticide has to have a license from the
Right.
state.
I understand
So,
that.
So there's all kinds of checks and balances,
Well,
you're saying,
oh,
in this.
My question is, what kind of license do you need to go out and spray Roundup all over the place? I don't really see that you would need a license to do that, and is that one that would be generally accepted for large-scale use underground mounted solar? I think they're just asking that there be a checks and balances. In other words, a self-policing agency by the applicant isn't necessarily going to meet all the criteria of safety that we would normally meet as a town. Right, because you don't
Yeah.
need a license to go down there and spray Roundup all over the place to clear out under the solar panels, but that might not be an approved herbicide for large-scale use.
And then this way, we could keep track of exactly what is going into the ground here. The state knows what's approved, but this way we could keep track of, this is seeping into the ground in Carver. So this is just a way for us to know what's happening in our town specifically. So,
Well, this has never come up before, but let me look into it, and see how we've handled it in the past, because all the solar fields that a lot of the ground-mounted solar fields, they do spray things, but then again, you have cranberry bog growers here too. I don't know who keeps tabs, but you say you have to, Roger was saying that you had to submit a list of what you...
It has to be submitted, also the handler has to okay it. And then the handler will come out and take samples and test them.
that's, the handler is something like Ocean Spray or Deacus.
Right.
I think the previous sentence is the qualifying sentence to that, where it says herbicides may only be used where it can be demonstrated that no danger is posed to groundwater supplies or local agriculture activities, and I think that's why the last sentence is in there.
Okay, we'll check that out, and I'll check that out and come back at the next meeting. And
So very, very quickly, Bruce, maybe you could read something like this. The Agricultural Commission and Board of Health are to confirm that all proposed herbicides meet the EPA and MDR regulations.
perfect.
Well, and the, right, and leave the previous sentence.
Yeah.
As
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Could I
so,
comment on abandonment on that same page? Page 7, last paragraph. As I was reading through this last week, it came to me, with the dual use, when you have abandonment, it has to be put back into its original form, correct? No matter who pays for it.
There's no way to. If you cut down trees, you can't
No, this
reforest
is,
it.
I think we only require
It's already on
restabilization of the
agricultural.
site. I think we only require restabilization of the site.
I can't hear you, could you speak?
Sorry, I think the town only requires restabilization of the site, reseeding, and I don't think there's a requirement to return the land to its pre-development state. It just, most of what these would deal with would be to use local grasses and pollinators to stabilize the soil so it doesn't all just wash away.
Roger, you're speaking specifically of dual use, though, right?
I'm just speaking
Yeah.
dual use. There's
Yeah,
no
that-
trees.
That sounds like a.
Over agricultural land already.
So
Yeah, it sounds like
my question
The
is,
right thing.
my question is, if it's dual use over cranberry bog, if that's taking, let's say it's abandoned,
Right.
or given up after its lifetime, that property is supposed to be brought back to its original use. Does that mean, I'm not for or against this, I'm just pointing out something. Does that mean if it's a dual use on a cranberry bog, that cranberry bog has to be brought back?
Well,
To
if
its
dual
original.
use works the way it's supposed to, that cranberry bog is still okay.
Right, but if it's abandoned,
Then we would need to.
they go out and tear it up in removing everything. You're no longer gonna have a working cranberry bog.
If it helps, we do hold a bond in regards to abandonment issues, and that bond should cover not only the removal of all the equipment, but to restore the site to acceptable conditions.
That's my point.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to
Right.
clarify.
I believe that's
Yeah.
included in the bond, yeah.
But like Savory said, if you have dual use, the way dual use works is you have to farm the cranberries and you have the solar over. So there shouldn't be, I mean, if they remove the solar, then after a certain amount of time to decommission, then what they do with the bog is either let it go to its natural state or continue farming the bog.
So,
Roger, aren't you suggesting that we should make it that they continue farming? Is that what you were trying to say?
No, I'm just saying, I lost it in my notes here, that be brought back to what its original state was.
Well, if it's,
And the way that, I've watched carefully the way they're putting these dual-use systems up. And if there isn't a lot of oversight, they're tearing the bogs apart. So if it's put out of commission, I'm afraid they're gonna go down and tear the bogs up as they take out. I mean,
I
these are,
see your concerns, like bringing in
Yeah.
equipment right onto the bogs to just.
you
pull
gotta
it-
tear up
and
sprinkler
that'll just-
systems, you gotta tear up vine. Yeah, I just didn't know if something should be added for that.
that sounds like it's something that we should work into it.
Right, and I want to make sure that dual use is included in that because it specifically says large-scale ground-mounted solar. But I expect that dual use also falls under the large-scale ground-mounted solar.
Roger, can I ask you, and you may not
Yes.
know, but
Okay.
the project that was on your land on Rochester, I know you said you don't own that land anymore.
Correct.
Was that harvested this fall? Do you know? Those
Uh,
bogs?
One of the bogs was, yes.
Okay, because I don't ever remember seeing.
The one, excuse me,
Yeah.
let me clarify that. The bog that had no poles put in was harvested.
Okay, so see right there, there's a dual use fail. If you have dual use solar is supposed to be continued, and right there you've got two dual use projects, Tremont and Rochester, and they weren't harvested for a year. So
2 years.
right, so right there, there's a fail by the state.
Now, there's requirements under the
they were
SMART
doing
program
the
in regards to yield, but I don't know who they
Right. I mean, right there, perfect example of your concern.
Well, that was unusual because of a lawsuit, and they put in the poles, and then they had to be taken out, but things were stopped because of the lawsuit. So that's not a natural state of the way it's supposed to go. I mean, this is just an odd thing that happened because it went to court, and there was a lawsuit there, so.
That's correct, because none of the handlers, the people that you sell the cranberries to, companies, would accept the cranberries that were in the environment where there were poles, even though they were taken out.
Because of the question of whether there was pollution there or not.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
So
why
that's
that,
just an odd thing that happened because of those poles being put there.
yeah, there was a
And there's
cease and
supposed to
desist.
be testing there after those poles are removed, I believe,
Mhm.
Avery?
Yeah.
So will determine if there was any kind of pollution that was left by the poles or not, and if it was going to be harmful to the cranberry crop. But
Right.
I can't see how that you could count that as a failure because it was in the middle of a court battle.
No, I don't consider that either.
So, as an add-on to yours, but onto another topic, was the financial surety. So we take a bond.
Mm-hmm.
Do we ever go back and review whether that bond is keeping up with inflation and the costs down the road?
Not that I know of.
It's
We usually
written
do
in there, the last
125%.
sentence. The project proponent shall submit a fully inclusive estimate of the costs associated with removal prepared by a qualified expert, which shall include a mechanism for calculating increased removal costs due to inflation.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
It's there.
Yeah, I missed that part. All
Yeah,
right.
it's there, so.
All right. Mechanism for calculating increased removal costs. Okay, so do we go through and review to make sure that the bond is sufficient every couple of years or so? Do
I
we
don't
have-
think, that doesn't seem to be in here. I think that the surety is for the life of the project itself.
Okay, so if we're basing it on 3% annualized at the time, then and we're facing, like right now, 8-10% plus inflation, we're gonna be underwater on the cost of removing in the event of an abandonment.
Well, the contract has already been signed at this point, so.
Right, I understand that. I'm thinking about as far, and, you know, looking at moving forward, because I'm pretty sure that we're gonna have quite a few applications coming up, that, something to consider is that the bond have a mechanism to be reviewed and updated every 3 to 5 years to make sure that it's keeping up with, cost of living.
Right, well, I think that one thing that you'd have to look at as part of the planning board is to, that it does state that the costs have to be prepared by a qualified expert, and it also says in the same paragraph that the planning board can determine, after the amount is determined, they can go up to 125% of that amount as part of the contract. So if there's a concern about inflation as well, you've got the qualified expert's cost plus 25% over that, and then you've got the cost due to inflation. So if we have 10% inflation for 20 every year for 20 years of a project, we're in a lot more trouble than getting money back from solar.
And it does still say that contract shall also include a mechanism for calculating increased removal costs due to inflation.
Right.
So that's got to be in the contract.
Yes, and it's inflation, it's not a percentage, it's
Correct.
inflation.
Correct.
So it's
Yeah.
it's related to inflation.
Right, I understand that. But again, it comes down to, we do a contract up today and we have a bond for $2 million.
Right.
And then 20 years from now, the worst has happened, and now $2 million is worth $10. We're all millionaires.
I get that, but
And,
the way I'm reading it, and I think the way Sarah's reading it, is that include a mechanism for calculating increased removal costs due to inflation, not setting a percentage that you think inflation will be.
No, right, I'm not saying that we should set a percentage. All I'm
Right.
saying is reviewing it reviewing the contract every 3 to 5 years with the ability to adjust.
But that's what the mechanism for calculating that
Okay,
is
but if
we're
we
told
take
it's
the-
supposed to be in the contract.
Right, so if we take the $2 million bond now, and in 20 years, when they come back and say, okay, we're abandoning the bog and it's gonna cost us $4 million in order to do it, and we've spent 20 years sitting on $2 million and saying, well, we can adjust for inflation, and the company's like, you guys never told us that there was gonna be this much additional cost. And now, without reviewing it, we could potentially be updating that bond at any point in time, saying, hey, the cost has gone from 2 million to 3 million now. Let's get an increased bond in there, so that there's not a fight at the very end.
I think that's probably a
So-
KP law question, because it's kind of changing contract midstream.
Yeah.
Right, well, not saying that it's changing the existing contracts, but now going forward with new contracts, because we changed.
I get that.
We changed the bylaw, then it's, those other guys are grandfathered, and.
Right, but yeah, I
we
think,
move
it-
forward onto the new ones.
I think KP law would know whether or not there is a dollar figure in there, or it's just a,
Yeah.
I
If
think
I
that-
may,
Yes, go ahead.
so when you look at the language in this, it has certain legal words such as shall. The project proponent shall submit a fully inclusive estimate of the cost associated with the removal, prepared by a qualified expert, so it's not the proponent who's preparing it, it's a qualified expert, which shall include a mechanism for calculating increased removal costs due to inflation. So that'll be in the proposal. It'll have the language that they must put in there, what you're saying, is the increased cost that's anticipated over that course of the 20 years or whatever the period is. And outside of that, if the costs are greater than what we have in a bond or in a security, then that's put on the property owner. And you put a lien on it, and you go to court, and you have to maybe sell the property or something to get recovery. So this already has that
Okay.
language in it that says that it shall be in there before you approve it.
That's
You
right.
know, it's here it is. This is what it's going to go up. But if you want to make contracts specific to every project, saying like, well, this project is big, so we might want to put 20% increase over the course of 20 years or 10 years or whatever. Then that's something that I think the town can pursue with those individual ones. But at the minimum, they have to have this included, the increase in the language for increased costs.
Okay, so concern about your statement there. You're talking about the landowner. So for the dual use.
Property owner, yeah.
For the property owner,
Yep.
so for the dual use that these guys are doing, the growers maintain ownership of the property. So you're saying that.
But they get a lease with the
They have,
company.
they have a lease with the company that decides to abandon the bog. So what you're saying is anything over the bond now is gonna be up to the owner of the property.
Yeah, if you look at the language
To take
above
care
it,
of.
too, like even the cost for removal is on the property owner. In the language under the prior that we just went over, the abandonment, the last line, the cost for removal may be charged to the property owner. So, ultimately, it'll become a lawsuit. and a three-way lawsuit with the property owner, and if the solar company is still in business, they'll be involved in the town. So that's why the mechanism says that it shall already have those increased costs, assuming what a reasonable increase would be over a period of how many of years it is.
John's actually not off base, and it's not something that I had thought of until I was looking into other towns' bylaws, and I was actually looking into battery storage bylaws to see if those exist, which they do. But in looking into those, I was reading solar bylaws, and there was at least one town that had a clause that said that their bonds were reviewed every 5 years. So he's not like completely in left field thinking that. So I don't think it's unreasonable to kind of change the wording at that last sentence to which shall be reviewed every 5 years and include a mechanism for calculating increased removal costs. Because to review it every 5 years over a 20-year span is 3 renewals, which isn't much. And then it kind of gives the town an idea of where the costs are at, and if the town chooses to not review after 5 years or drops the ball and doesn't review, at least the town explicitly has the choice to and say, oh, we're overdue. We are going to do an analysis of that financial surety. So kind of interesting that you bring that up because I just came across that. So I think it makes sense to just add that in, which shall be reviewed every 5 years and include a mechanism for calculating blah, blah, blah.
Any changes that we may want to make to these bylaws, I've discussed with Tom and probably Bob too, we'll have to go before KP Law just to make sure that
Right.
they're correct and will pass the Attorney General's scrutinization.
Yeah, I think the town even had KP Law. I think I remember seeing that on their website. I wish I remember who it was. The tab's open on my computer.
Okay, we could look into that. I
Because
think
like
that
every town uses KP.
we can check that out. It doesn't seem to be unreasonable.
Yep.
All right, anything else? I thought we'd be a lot further ahead than we are right now. I never thought we'd even get into any of this stuff because there's a lot heavier stuff ahead of us. And it's 20 past 6 now, and we probably want to be out of here by about 6:45. Anyway?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. So then the next thing was the smart the dual use array chart, and that was added in 2019, which I will have more to say about that later. With that, I'll unless there are any more questions on the existing solar bylaw, I'll move on. Is there anything else that anybody has any concerns with? There are other things we'll be looking at also, but this was just one part of it for the meeting tonight. I'm seeing nobody coming forward. I'm just kind of, unfortunately, have to move along because we don't have much time. 1B on the agenda was the Attorney General letter of September 19th, 2022, and this was addressing the rooftop solar that was proposed and voted in at the last town meeting. And if I just wanted to go through the comments on page 5 through 7. Actually start on, okay, so this was for the rooftop solar. But on page 5, it says, now this is what the state why they want to protect solar uses. So protection for solar uses under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, subsection 3. And solar, I'm just going to read through part of this. Solar uses are protected. The legislature determined that certain land uses are so important to the public good that the legislature has found it necessary to take away some measure of municipalities' power to limit the use of the land. And then if you go down a bit, to that end, the provision of Section 3 strike a balance between preventing local discrimination against a set of enumerated land uses while honoring legitimate municipal concerns. And then if you go down to the next paragraph, solar energy facilities and related structures have been protected under Section 3 since 1985. Then on page 6, at the top of the page, no zoning bylaw shall prohibit or unreasonably regulate the installation of solar energy systems or the building of structures that facilitate the collection of solar energy, except where necessary to protect the public health, safety, or welfare. And then the next paragraph, a little bit in, the legislature determined that neighborhood hostility or contrary local preferences should not dictate whether solar energy systems are constructed in sufficient quantity to meet the public need. And then on the next paragraph, this wasn't highlighted. The Supreme Judicial Court has recently reaffirmed large-scale systems not ancillary to any residential or commercial use are key to promoting solar energy in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The amount of solar power needed by 2050 exceeds the full technical potential in the Commonwealth for rooftop solar, indicating that substantial deployment of ground-mounted solar is needed under any circumstance in order to achieve a net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2050. And then the next sentence down, while municipalities do have some flexibility to reasonably limit where certain forms of solar energy may be sited, the validity of any restriction ultimately entails balancing the interest that the bylaw advances against the impact on the protected solar use. And then on the next paragraph, Waltham had unreasonably restricted solar energy systems by excluding large-scale solar arrays for most zoning districts and in all but 1% to 2% of the city's land area. But the court explained that Waltham's categorical and extensive limitation on large-scale solar arrays, a critical form of solar energy system, undermined the state policy favoring solar energy and lacked any public health, safety, or welfare justification sufficient to justify the extent of the restriction. So, and then on page 7, it's like the first full paragraph. However, used to deny solar projects or otherwise applied in ways that make it impractical or uneconomical to build solar energy systems, such application would run a serious risk of violating Mass General Law, Chapter 48, subsection 3. So I just read that just to show how the state is trying to protect solar, and I think the battery storage goes along with the solar too. I don't know, are there any questions about that?
What exactly did Article 14 say?
Article,
It exempts roof-mounted solar installations on new non-residential buildings in the town's Green Business Park District.
well, that particular letter there was from the Attorney General, and that was to approve of that bylaw that was created for the Green Business Park. But also they included all that other stuff that I read, just to show how the state wants towns to handle solar and energy storage.
And although the
Yeah, but it
Attorney
helps to-
General,
But it helps to understand the context of where, the way that they're speaking to us.
Right, no, I did state that at the beginning, but I didn't go into it, but I did say that this was the letter for the business park for the solar array on top of the building. And this was in the
Yeah,
letter.
but it goes, I mean, it talks a lot more than just about just that one thing. That the large-scale ground-mounted solar voltaic installations to exempt small-scale and building and roof-mounted solar installations from section 3580. And, that exempted them from a big part of large ground-mounted solar systems.
Well, the whole
So-
reason, yeah, that came about was
And then-
so that we wouldn't have to go to the planning board as a separate solar facility that would have to be under special permit, site plan review and special permit,
Right.
because the solar arrays were part of the building.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's what it was about. So, but the only reason I read the other stuff, and I guess it's highlighted on your packets too.
right.
It was just highlighted just to show how important all this stuff is to the state and how they feel about hindering solar and battery storage. Just, and you'll see it on other parts of the, where the Attorney General has looked at some of the solar, and they use the same language. Solar bylaws that were changed or added. So, if there isn't any other questions, I'll go on to 1C. I mean, we could bring these up later, but I just kind of, I don't know how in-depth everybody has looked at this. Just kind of wanted to go through and highlight it. We'll have other meetings to go through this. But the next part of the packet was 1C. And this was bylaw amendments tabled at 2021 town meeting. And what happened at 2021, well, we had these bylaw changes that we proposed. It went through the planning board looked at this, and this is kind of confusing because there's a lot of stuff in red, there's a lot of stuff that's lined out or struck out. And it was a prior planner that was here, and being new to this solar, he was trying to go through the bylaws, and he was having problems with it because the bylaws weren't clear. So at the time, I think we had a different building commissioner here. They were looking at the bylaws, and so Jim Walsh wanted to present these to town meeting to kind of clarify some of the solar bylaws. And when we brought it, when I brought it before town meeting, as it turned out, there were a lot of changes. It was hard to take at town meeting. It was confusing to people, and as we found out, as I went through these, it was kind of at a rush to go to town meeting, and then we found out by KP Law that not all of these changes had been vetted correctly before town meeting. So what happened is we decided to table these changes and to send them back to the planning board to look at them again. And and I would like for, and I asked Tom Bott to make a copy of this so we could bring it to the meeting tonight, and so people could look at it, the board commission could look at it. And so here they are. And there's an explanation in the back of all these, 11 of 11. And instead of going through each one of these, it'll take time for everybody, if you haven't looked at it yet, take time to look at these. But the explanation was, number one was to amend section 3580 10, and the purpose by inserting after the phrase, "The purpose of this bylaw is to promote the creation of a new large-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installation, including conventional and dual use." And the reason that a lot of these are here before us tonight was because at first we just had ground-mounted, and then years later we had dual use, and in some of the regulations, some of the setbacks were different for ground-mounted than dual use. And at the time, Mr. Walsh wanted to come up with a chart that was easy to read, because a lot of projects were coming into town, and and people couldn't figure out exactly what to do with the ground-mounted and the dual-use systems, because they had different regulations. So he kind of wanted to make everything into one easy, readable thing that could go on, and as boards changed and as town planners changed, everybody could understand it. So we had, and so you wanted to clarify language regarding small-scale solar projects. That was one of the things that people used to come to the planner for, and they used to say, I don't know if we have a small-scale solar project or a large-scale. And so he wanted to change, to clarify that, which is in what he's done here. He was going to add a new dimensional table and delete smart and dual-use array table, clarify the language regarding the setback and screening waivers in the residential agricultural zoning district, and to make the setback requirements for conventional and dual-use solar installations the same. So that's what he tried to do here. So now we have a new building commissioner. I think it would be nice for Tom and probably Paul Boucher to look at these and see what they thought and how they could, clarify these and make these better, if they should be incorporated into the bylaws. Because it's the building commissioner and the planner that has to use these regulations, and if they're confusing, it's going to be confusing to them. Another thing that we ran into over the years is we had a lot of solar systems coming before us, and some didn't have frontage, but they had, some had frontage, but it was through wetlands. Others didn't have the required frontage. And some had access to the properties through easements through other cranberry bog growers' property. So we kind of wanted to add something in there, thinking that maybe there would be some good projects that could be screened on some large pieces of land where people wouldn't see them, and didn't want to not use those pieces of land just because they didn't have frontage or the correct frontage. So there was this part to allow the planning board to waive some of the frontage requirements for sites that are well screened from abutting properties, so long as the proposed access meets Carver Fire Department standards. And the planning board has encountered some proposals for solar projects that may be well suited for the location being proposed, except the property lacks the proper frontage on a public way. And as solar projects are generally co-located with agricultural operations that use bog roads for access, the applicant must ensure that either existing or proposed access roads meet the Carver Fire Department standards. If the applicant is using an easement or right-of-way owned by another party, then the applicant must provide a copy of an access agreement which shows the applicant has access to the project for the life of the project. So,
Bruce, could I just interrupt? Excuse me, this, the sentence right in the middle where it says, "As solar projects are generally co-located with agricultural operations that use bog roads for access," period, is not a sentence, and I think it's a typo. I think it should be a comma, and then that, since that is the case on agricultural applications, therefore, the applicant must ensure that either existing or proposed access road meet Carver Fire Department standards. I think, to me, it reads like that's all one sentence, because the first sentence isn't really, it doesn't have a, it's not a sentence. Do you see what I'm saying? You read it as if they were one connected sentence, which is the way I'm
that's
seeing
because
it.
I'm trying to read fast. But, yeah, no, I understand.
See
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So I
Well,
think-
these aren't set in stone.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to have Tom and Paul Boucher, look at these things.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And some they may agree, and some they may not agree to.
Mm-hmm.
And then also for the people here to, take a look at them and see what they think of them. Because,
I just have a question. On number 4 here, I don't see any references in the proposed past couple pages that deal with, any changes deal with frontage or access.
there were, like I say, it is confusing, what was presented before town meeting. So, I mean, maybe we could do this in a better way, but I don't know exactly where that is right now, but there was, see, this was for, oh, that's because, I don't know if this
Not
isn't,
all the
this
pages
isn't
are
the full
here?
bylaw.
Okay, yeah,
here.
that's what I
This
thought.
is just pieces of it, but if you go into the full bylaw, it explains what you have to have for frontage and everything, so.
Now, the other thing I would mention is on page 5 of 11, where the chart is, it should be brought into the standard of 50 feet when abutting a residential area.
Yeah, 'cause
That's just to bring that up.
yeah, there was a conflict, and that was picked up by the planning board when we reviewed this before town meeting at that time. We were gonna make both of them 50. And then also in this, there was a question, and then it later, on a project, it did go to court to clarify the language regarding abutter affidavits from all direct butters or any direct abutters. And so that's in here too, you know, what to do with that. And then on 6, it was to add a new section 3580, 44 to the bylaw to address the sale or transfer of solar projects, and requires a meeting with the planning board to review site plans and conditions of approval with the new owner. And I think that's already in our bylaws. We have to take a look at that. So, you know, I'd like to, like I say, I'd like to talk to Tom when he gets back about these things, and then, you know, we can review these and as we go along.
It is in the,
Yeah, yeah. All right, I don't know if there's any questions, or I just wanted to get to the next one for us to consider later on. Just want to, we get a few minutes yet. Another one that I brought before at that same town meeting was the solar canopies. And this was vetted correctly, so this did go up for a vote in 2021. Or, no, it wasn't 2021, I think it was.
Yeah, it was 2021.
Was it 2021? Gee, it seems like a lot longer than that to me, but. All right, so solar canopies, and if you go down on the first page, it says informational summary. And this was the problem that Jim and I saw. The 2019 annual town meeting approved Article 17, which was the lease of air rights over town-owned land for solar canopies. And that was, I remember reviewing the plans for the new police department, and also reviewing the plans for the new school across the street. And there were, I think, renderings of solar canopies in back of the police department, and there were solar canopies in the parts of the parking lot at the school. And those at the police station were to, was so the police could park their cars underneath the solar canopies, and you know, protect them from rain, snow, and stuff like that. And also, that would also work for buses at the school too. The buses could park underneath there. So the vote approved the transfer of the care and custody of municipal parking lots of specified town-owned properties to the select board for the lease of air rights, easements, etc., to provide to private solar developers that would allow the development of solar canopies over municipal parking lots. This proposed amendment would amend the zoning bylaw to allow the solar canopies as a second principal use, so any electrical power generated may be sold to the electrical grid if the power generated could not be used locally due to existing power agreements.
Now, my question would be, solar canopies are a permitted principal use in all zoning districts? It's 3590.20 locations, but it's reiterated as a second principal use down the bottom. What's the difference between principal and primary? I mean, for instance, if I wanted to put them up in my back field and call them solar canopies as opposed to the solar field, what?
But it's used in all zoning districts where municipal facilities are a permitted use.
And municipal facilities are permitted in all.
Well, I don't know that.
districts.
I don't know that.
So.
We would have to ask someone who knows.
Well, whatever that, we can look into that, but the thing is that this was approved at town meeting.
Okay.
So this was approved at town
It
meeting.
says-
No, this failed.
This failed.
This failed, Bruce.
Yeah.
On our copy, Tom wrote at the top that it failed.
Yeah.
I don't remember
This
that.
one- This one failed. I
Oh.
remember that specifically.
And-
It failed in-
Well,
because nobody wanted the ugly
No.
canopy.
In
Oh,
2019,
we-
there were parking lots that were approved for canopies, but no bylaw was written for them, so nothing happened.
okay,
So in 2021, a bylaw was proposed so the canopies could happen,
okay.
and the bylaw failed. And a problem I
Yes.
see with the bylaw is that it doesn't say anything except they can be done. There's no design standards, no nothing. I mean, look at
Well,
the solar bylaw with
right, yeah.
There's no specs on the site plan review. What are you reviewing? There's no specs at all.
Right,
So
no screening or requirements, for instance, if,
drainage or
Yeah.
spacing or materials or anything. So-
Well, all I'm saying is we should take a look at it. I don't know if anybody's for it or not. I think, people were confused at town meeting. There were people that were concerned about the solar being detrimental to their children at school, but people do have solar over the roofs of their houses, so. And then people were concerned about where the electrical power went, and the thing is that the town benefits from these by the lease of the land, and also by using these as sort of like a garage for vehicles. So I just thought that we should take a look at this and see if it's worthwhile or not.
Yeah. It's just
That's all.
incomplete. It just needs
Yeah, I
specs
mean,
and stuff. Like,
yeah.
Like
Yeah,
no,
it needs-
if
It needs
if
to be
someone-
better integrated into the,
Mhm.
if someone
Right.
wanted to bring this to the planning board and brought, Connie and John brought you guys plans, you guys would have nothing to compare it to see if it met a standard based on this bylaw.
Right, I think that, yeah, we'd have to take a look at this and see how it does go before the planning board, what kind of plans they'd have to bring in and
how
set up
tall
some
can
sort-
they be,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
material
yeah,
use.
Yeah, yeah. But I think it's something that's worth looking at because
I agree.
it's a town benefit. All right, it's getting late. I think unfortunately, we're gonna have to leave, just as we were just having fun getting into this here. Next meeting, I believe will be December 13th, and we'll do December 13th at 5:30. I did point out at the beginning, and we can discuss this at our next meeting. I don't think Mr. Fennessy was here when I mentioned this, but the moratorium for the solar and battery storage was disapproved by the Attorney General. So as far as I believe now, there really is no moratorium in place.
That's right.
That's correct.
So we can talk about that, put that on the agenda, and if that's a concern to anyone, we should talk about that and see, where that leaves us, what we have to do in the future here, with these bylaws. So with that, December 13th, 5:30, I wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, same to you.
I'm happy to see, I know this is a tough time of year, but we had a good turnout of board members here. I was kind of worried about that tonight. So having said that, entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, Ms. Hewens made the motion, Savory Moore second. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.